Hey there, and thanks for joining us on Chicago Tonight. I'm Brandis Friedman.
And I'm Paris Schutz. Here's what we're looking at.
People of Chicago don't want people up here bickering.
An informative and at times testy WTTW mayoral forum last night in our Spotlight Politics.
A South suburban Prairie that once played refuge to endangered birds is now facing its own threats. We share the story of ORLAND Grassland.
When I became an architect, I did it because I thought that everybody had to do their part to save the world.
And renowned Chicago architect Carol Ross Barney wins a major award.
And now to some of today's top stories. Still no identity on the man Chicago police shot and killed early this morning after a chase outside a bar in the Irving Park neighborhood. Police say they were called to the scene after the man threatened a security guard with a gun. He ran away into an alley once officers arrived. Superintendent David Brown says he exchanged gunfire with officers and the man was hit by bullets and pronounced dead at the scene. Brown says he expects videos from the scene will aid in the investigation.
There was body-worn camera video. There likely is going to be other pod camera video maybe nearby that we have yet to recover. But from what we know now, based on looking at the body-worn camera, the offender fired his weapon and the officers fired their weapon.
Police say they recovered a gun and extended magazine at the scene. One of the officers is a 12-year veteran, the other a probationary officer.
Some of Cook County's south suburbs are taking in just a fraction of the tax revenue that their governments are owed. A new study from the Cook County Treasurer's Office found that Ford Heights was only able to collect about 29% of the tax revenue charged within 25 days of taxes being due. Other suburbs like Robin, seen here, Harvey and Phoenix had collection rates around 50%. The treasurer says when residents don't pay up, the towns struggle to afford the basic services that support those residents, or they have to raise tax rates to make up the shortfall. The south suburbs fell well below the overall county tax collection rate, which sits at 96%.
3 years since the start of the pandemic and more than 2 years since the first COVID-19 vaccines were given, the Chicago Department of Public Health says its final vaccine clinic will be this Saturday. CDPH says it'll be the 589th pop-up clinic in partnership with City Colleges of Chicago, which helped vaccinate nearly 128,000 people. That last clinic will be at Truman College on the north side from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m.
Chicago business and sports leaders mourn the death of Andrew McKenna. McKenna is the former chairman of McDonald's, the Chicago Cubs, the White Sox, and had most recently been a minority owner of the Bears. McKenna was also active in Chicago's political and philanthropic community. McDonald's, the Cubs, and Bears all issued statements praising McKenna's leadership and his role as a civic giant in Chicago.
And coming up in the program, protecting a local prairie from an invasive species.
But first, highlights from our mayoral forum, and there were a few last night.
That's a good one.
That's going to be in our Spotlight Politics right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
Things got heated between the candidates at our WTTW News mayoral forum last night. The mayor's race is the focus of tonight's Spotlight Politics. And here is, of course, our Spotlight Politics team, Amanda Vinicky, Heather Sharon, Paris, everybody knows him, and sitting in with the band tonight, special guest Joanna Hernandez.
I'm with the cool kids today.
Thanks, gang. Welcome to the table. Of course, candidates were first asked about Chicago's crime problem. Take a look.
Clearly, there's this perception, or maybe it's reality, that downtown is unsafe. And if you talk to everyone, and I've talked to all the business groups there, public safety is the #1 issue.
If you commit a crime, you hurt somebody, you kill somebody, they should be hunted down like a rabbit. That's what I said. That's what I meant.
Absolutely outrageous. Because what he's saying is that because you have the pain of loss of a victim of gun violence, as unfortunately way too many people in the city have, that we should turn our police department into a group of vigilantes to hunt down and kill people.
Heather Vallis mentioned the perception, or maybe it's reality, of downtown being unsafe. In politics, isn't perception reality?
Sure, especially when it comes to something as visceral an issue of crime and safety and being able to go downtown and go shopping with your family. This is the tough sort of high wire act the mayor has to execute. She has to say, look, I'm working on crime, my strategies are paying off, but the fact of the matter is that while murders might be down 14% year over year, they're still higher than they were before the pandemic, and overall crime is still up somewhere in the neighborhood of 40%. So that makes it tough, especially when you have a candidate like Paul Vallis running in the race and Willie Wilson sort of sounding those tough on crime, crack down on criminals sound bites.
And really quick, as long as we're looking at the candidates, speaking of perception, Chuy Garcia going to the State of the Union versus our mayoral forum. What's the perception there, Heather?
Well, I got a lot of tweets suggesting that this was a suggestion that he wanted to keep his job in Washington and not basically get his job in Chicago. Now, he did attend the WBEZ Reset Forum today, so he is clearly still in the race. But it is tough running for one office when you're already in another office, and this was an example of that.
Don't forget, he was kind of late to get going on this campaign, late to get on the airwaves.
He was running to keep his current job.
That, and he was sitting for 14 votes or 15 votes for Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy, that took a week.
Yeah, so it took him a little while. Paris, Willie Wilson, though, did he finally clarify his whole, hunt down criminals like rabbits issue?
I don't think that he did, and the reason I wanted to ask it the way I did was because originally what it seemed like he said was criminals should be hunted down like rabbits, and so do you mean someone that knocked off a store who might be an unarmed teenager that's fleeing from the police? So you can't shoot that person, and there are rules around foot pursuits, and there is constitutional policing that you have to follow. So it's very important to drill down on what Willie Wilson means. And he kind of pivoted to talking about the tragedy involving his son, which is how he's answered this question before. So no, unless anyone else did, I did not get an answer on how he feels about, again, this particular situation. If it's someone unarmed that's running from the cops, do you think that that cop can just chase that person down and shoot at them? I don't know.
We don't have
Wilson
details
thinks.
from him. All we have is really the sentiment that he has been expressing for quite some time in terms of really police having more power, it seems, is what he wants, but without details about what that might mean, in what circumstances, how that would fit with the consent decree, and so on.
Certainly that plays with a segment of the population, but again, governing is very different than campaigning. You get in there, you have a consent decree, you have people's lives on the line, you have all these shootings that happen all across the country, like just happened in Memphis. We have to know what exactly your policy is going to be.
Amanda, who, if anyone, in this race is breaking through on crime?
If I knew that, I would probably be able to, and I am not, nor am I able to predict who is going to be Chicago's next mayor. But I do think that you clearly have some tracks here, right? You do have Vallis, and then as we talked about, Wilson as well, really positioning themselves as the law and order candidate. And that's something that the other candidates, by the way, are seeming to cede to them to a certain degree, where there are also more middle of the line candidates, where they want to continue to give funding to police. You have Lightfoot probably in that lane, Sophia King, and then you have the more where their critics would say it's defund the police. They would say no, we want to give more resources to combating crime, uplifting neighborhoods, and so Brandon Johnson is clearly the progressive figurehead along those lines. So in terms of who is breaking through on crime, I really think it is what you as a voter consider helpful to combating crime and bringing down violence in the city.
And to those voters, Joanna, you were in one of the communities last night. The three of us were out. What are folks in the community saying? How did they respond to the politicians' responses on crime?
Yeah, I really want to piggyback of what Amanda's saying. So it was really interesting because they had pom-poms at the viewing. So when they agreed with something, they would wave the green. When they didn't agree with something, they would wave the red pom-pom. And what I kept saying is that what I kept seeing is that they kept feeling Brandon Johnson's and Jamal Green's ideas on how to combat violence. That was really interesting. They really wanted to hear targeting solutions to target the youth, in terms of enterprise jobs, in terms of trade opportunities, youth centers. They didn't want to hear about over-policing. They didn't want to hear about funding the police. They wanted to hear more about what can be done in these communities to prioritize the youth. This is specifically something that they kept talking about.
And then again, that don't involve cops.
Right.
Don't involve cops.
And then you have Vallis, for example, who has not accepted the endorsement of the Fraternal Order of Police. And there are a segment of voters that hate that. It sounds like the crowd that you were with. And then others to very much embrace that and would say, oh, this is who the police back.
Although,
that might be it.
Consider the Vallis's first answer to the first question, what would you do about folks in Austin, young men in Austin who have this high risk of getting shot and killed? Vallis's answer was not police, was not cops. It was interesting that his answer was keeping the schools open and having places for folks to go. Maybe sort of an acknowledgement that you've got to broaden your message beyond one that resonates just with the FOP.
And then he talked about the firing of the Proud Boy affiliated police officer.
So they also had to talk, of course, about the consent decree. Candidates were asked about the Chicago Police Department's low compliance rate with that federal consent decree, which mandates Chicago policing reforms. Here they are.
A consent decree that is only 5% complied with. 5%. That means we're a 95% failure. If we're going to do things differently in this city, we've got to change the way we operate, and that has to start on day one.
Fire the Proud Boy, not the officer that's over the consent decree.
Quickly, please.
If you believe in the consent decree.
I appreciate that all these folks want to throw bombs from the cheap seats. The fact of the matter is, the facts are really clear. We are in compliance. We're improving our compliance every single day. And this nonsense that you're hearing from some of these folks is really completely belied by the facts.
Throwing bombs from the cheap seats. That is a good line, right? Heather, on Monday, a coalition of more than 24 groups working to reform CPD told Lightfoot in a letter that they are, quote, deeply troubled by the city's lack of consent decree progress. Lori Lightfoot won won all of the wards in the last election, and a lot of it had to do with her platform on reforming policing.
That's right. She presented herself, as she does even a couple times now, as somebody who had spent the bulk of her career focusing on these issues, trying to instill constitutional policing in Chicago after a 2017 Department of Justice investigation found that Chicago police officers routinely violated the constitutional rights of primarily Black and Latino Chicagoans. Until last night, though, we had not heard much from these candidates on this consent decree, which will be in place at least until 2027 and will really tie the hands of whoever is elected in April, assuming we get to a runoff. The question is what have we accomplished over these past 4 years that Lightfoot has been in office? And if you look at the police department's own statistics, not very much. And I'll invite everybody to come back to our website tomorrow morning, where I have a deep, in-depth look at this very issue.
Of course you do, and we're all looking forward to it. So let's get into the bickering that we saw last night. Take a look at the back and forth over the police superintendent's decision to not fire an officer after a probe found that he lied about his ties to the Proud Boys.
Of course, we should not hire, we should not support, we should not retain any officer that is associated with any hate group. But of course, we've got to hold on, Mr. Johnson, please, Mr. Johnson, please. I know you want to mansplain up here, but you got to give me the opportunity.
Wait, don't you quiet it down, because she's confused, you know. All right. So let a person finish, Ms. Mayor. You know, all right. So I don't let you, okay? Let a person finish.
I'm talking to Mr. Vallis.
Well, you shouldn't be talking when I'm talking.
Trying to treat me like I'm some child.
You should not be talking when I'm talking. All right.
Now we're talking.
No, wait. Let me
just
finish my point. Let me finish my point.
This is exactly what the people of Chicago don't want. People up here bickering. They want to hear our solutions to the problems.
Oof. Amanda, a lot there. Did Sophia King come out looking best on that one?
Perhaps. You know, I mean, I think there are, again, everybody's looking for something different. And you look at somebody like Lightfoot, who became mayor because she was able to really assert herself in a lot of these forums and mayoral stages when she was relatively unknown 4 years ago. There is a degree to which people want a leader who stands up, who gets in there, especially on issues that are as visceral, as you termed it earlier, as crime. Then again, yes, when you get to the degree where it's just bickering, sniping, she presented herself looking like a grown-up, and that is something that perhaps, again, it is a quick line that perhaps can be, we just played it.
We're playing it again today.
Other stations may play it and continue to talk about it, and that's the sort of traction that somebody like King is going to need if she is going to rise in any of these polls and have an opportunity.
Get into that runoff, right? Joanna, how do community members respond to this?
You know, they were not having it. You know, obviously, you heard the gas, but at most part, they just felt like they were deflecting from the actual issues, right? They want to feel that these candidates really feel the struggle that the everyday, you know, Chicagoan is dealing with, and they're
fighting with each other.
But they're fighting with each other. So at the end, we were able to talk to some of the people there, and they just felt like some of their questions were not answered.
Paris, you know, a lot of forums, right? 3 weeks to go. Is the pressure getting to them?
The pressure is definitely getting to them, not just because of the forums, and maybe partly because of that. They're getting used to each other and sitting next to each other and arguing with each other. But the attack ads now are flying a lot heavier, and you've got, you know, a couple of front runners, maybe as many as 3 or 4, and they're neck and neck. And anytime that happens, things get super tense, and the attacks start flying, and people, you know, look for the dirt on these candidates, and you can see the intensity in the faces of these candidates as we're 3 weeks away.
Heather, mansplaining.
We understand for that here.
We don't. So mansplaining is when a man, and Paris would never do this, of course, when he explains something to a woman that, of course, she knows. Now, I saw Johnson interrupt Lightfoot. Now, Johnson said afterwards he thought she was done talking, so he felt free to jump in. Afterwards, he apologized to her, and Lightfoot said she accepted his apology, but that it was mansplaining. I didn't see Johnson explain anything to Lightfoot, so I don't know that it's mansplaining. But this is just another example of how Lightfoot is always prepared to counterpunch, whether it, you know, serves her or does not serve her, especially when it takes away from a discussion about whether the Chicago Police Department is prepared to welcome back a man who had ties to the Proud Boys, the far-right extremist group implicated in the January 6th insurrection. It's a big question.
All right. More to come. That's Spotlight. Thanks, everybody. Amanda. Already? I know, right? Time flies when we're having fun on Spotlight. All right, gotta let it go. Amanda, Heather, Joanna, Paris. Thanks, gang. A near 1,000-acre prairie that's quickly vanishing before our eyes. The story of ORLAND, GRASSLAND, right after this. What should the city be doing to better support Black Chicagoans who are victims and survivors of hate crimes?
Classic city of Chicago, we work in silos, so the left hand doesn't know what the right hand doing, and the constituents get left out in between.
Power is the voice. The power is the numbers. The power are the people. The ability to sway elections is the power.
There's a near 1,000-acre field at the southwestern edge of Cook County that could easily be mistaken as a development opportunity. But as WTTW News reporter Patty Wetley points out, it's a globally significant grassland refuge for endangered wildlife that's now facing some of its own threats. And Patty joins us now with more. So, Patty, we're talking about the ORLAND grassland, which is managed by Cook County Forest Preserves.
Right.
Tell us what makes it so special.
Well, for starters, that 1,000 acres that you mentioned, it's so amazing to have something that size. This isn't like a pristine prairie remnant. It's a restoration in progress, but it's large enough that it can provide habitat for these grassland birds, which need vast amounts of open space. And as you know from living in Chicago, huge amounts of open space are really hard to come by. So it supports these birds that can't find habitat really almost anywhere else in the world.
It's part of such a sprawling part of the forest preserve in the southwest suburbs, such a cool area. So you're saying, though, the ORLAND grassland has some issues of its own now. Tell us about them.
Yeah, there's an invasive species called the Calorie pear, which a lot of us know as the Bradford pear, which was a super popular ornamental tree. Well, it's invasive. Birds eat the berries, they travel into the forest preserve, do their business, and all of a sudden you have hundreds, thousands of these shoots coming up. And I've talked to site stewards there, and they've said they've lost acres of what was critical habitat for some endangered birds. This grows so fast, so furious, you can't knock it out. It's really dangerous.
So are there any efforts right now to mitigate this?
Well, Illinois is thinking about recommending it for listing the Calorie pear on its noxious weed list, but also, weirdly enough, they've just acquired 15 acres of land across the street from ORLAND's main entrance. There's actually a tool shed there, and the importance of that tool shed is that all of the contractors and the really devoted volunteers who do work days will have more time because they won't have to haul their tools and equipment from miles or suburbs away. They can put in more hours digging out that invasive species.
All right, maybe some help is on the way there.
Hopefully.
Very cool spot. I didn't even know that existed.
It's so gorgeous. When I heard it's a place where you can see like earth touch sky, I was like, I have to go, and that's what it's like.
So many hidden natural gems in the Chicago area, and that's why you're here, Patty, to tell us all about them. Thanks very much.
Thanks.
And you can read Patty's full story on our website, WTTW.com/news. Up next, a local architect wins a coveted prize. But first, a look at the weather. A groundbreaking Chicago architect recently won the gold medal from the American Institute of Architects. That's a prestigious award previously given to luminaries like Louis Sullivan, Frank Lloyd Wright, and Mies van der Rohe. If you're not familiar with her name, you almost certainly have experienced a lot of her work. I recently visited her architecture studio to get a glimpse at how she creates iconic designs with a specific purpose. Chicago architect Carol Ross Barney says she's been guided by a mission to use architecture to better people's lives.
Every space needs good design. The amount of benefit to the quality of life that well-designed environments add, it's extraordinary.
Barney founded her architecture practice 41 years ago. Instead of high-profile buildings for wealthy clients, she has chosen to focus on public parks, schools, government buildings, and basic infrastructure.
We're not doing museums or our fancy houses. We're doing everyday buildings and everyday spaces. And I think that's really a very valuable idea.
Her firm has designed more than 20 CTA stations, including the tubular Green Line station on Cermak near McCormick Place.
This tube was built on the ground in this empty lot right here, and then lifted into place.
Barney has also designed multiple McDonald's franchises, including the Chicago flagship in River North that took the place of the Rock and Roll McDonald's. It's the first ever certified LEED Platinum fast food franchise. She says McDonald's is one of her favorite clients because it gives her the opportunity to build a space that can be enjoyed by everyone.
Not only that, they should be healthy spaces. They should be centers of community. They should be healthy. They should be sustainable.
Perhaps her most transformative project to date, the Chicago Riverwalk, a project she says she dreamt about her entire life.
I thought it would be a transformative job, but I did not anticipate how transformative it would really be.
Barney says the Riverwalk, like all of her work, began with the need to solve multiple problems. For one, there wasn't enough land to build on, so the city got permission to build floating walkways out on the river. Second, she said that she wanted each city block to have its own distinct theme.
One is a harbor, one is a beach, one is a theater that comes down to the river, one is features natural plants.
Pulitzer Prize-winning former Chicago Tribune architecture critic Blair Kamen says it's almost a miracle to take on public projects and make them stand out architecturally.
These are on public budgets. They're with bureaucratic agencies, which are normally not the patrons of great architecture, and yet she's managed to negotiate that thicket and raise the level of all of these projects to, the level of art.
Perhaps her most daunting design, the rebuilding of the Oklahoma City Federal Building after the 1995 bombing. Barney says she got her ideas from talking to the people that worked there and survived.
I think they weren't really happy about the idea of going back to that site. But what we also learned by talking to them, that they didn't want to be scared away. And so the idea behind the building became that we had to create a building that was safe and strong, but still reflected open government.
The American Institute of Architects voted to give Barney its most prestigious award this year, the Gold Medal, putting her among the ranks of Chicago luminaries like Frank Lloyd Wright, Louis Sullivan, and Mies van der Rohe. The AIA cites her, quote, architecture that betters the daily life of all who interact with it. With her focus on design excellence, social responsibility, and generosity, Barney is an unrivaled architect for the people. Kamen says the award shows how great architecture is about much more than designing buildings.
Carol's contribution is different. It's more about spaces than objects, and that's really where she's excelled.
Ross Barney says she takes particular pride in being only one of 3 women to receive the prize, recalling that she was one of 12 women out of 312 students in her first architecture course at the University of Illinois.
It is a man's profession. I say that with some trepidation because it is changing. I mean, it's not ahead or behind the rest of our society, but it's still not easy for women professionals. And so I'm really glad to win it for that reason.
And Ross Barney has some big projects ahead of her. Namely, she's been tasked with designing DuSable Park, just east of Lakeshore Drive and south of Navy Pier. And that is our show for this Wednesday night. Don't forget to stay connected with us by signing up for our daily briefing. And you can get Chicago Tonight streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and our website, WTTW.com/news.
You can also get the show via podcast and the PBS video app. And please join us tomorrow night live at 10. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Brandis Friedman.
And I'm Paris Schutz. Thank you so much for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and have a great evening.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a proud sponsor of diversity, equity, and inclusion-focused free continuing legal education for lawyers throughout the region.
Next time.
From now on, your first duty is to me.
When an arrogant newspaper tycoon retires in Kembleford, an attempt is made on his life.
Shot must have been taken from here.
But Father Brown's investigation is interrupted.
I must suspend you with immediate effect.
And it could mean the end of his career.
What will people call you now, Mr. Brown?
Father Brown.
Thursday at 8 on WTTW.
Next time on Shakespeare and Hathaway.
I'm telling you, someone is out to get me.
The head of a salon hires the team to investigate an arson.
We could be looking at attempted murder.
Lou's hairdressing background opens some doors.
You will look amazing.
Can you fix it?
Yes.
But to get to the truth,
it's a cutthroat business, Frank.
Lou will have to reveal her past.
Something terrible happened to me, too.
Shakespeare and Hathaway.